Get your filthy hands off my desk. You people are here to clean, not to sit. The strawberry smoothie hit her chest before anyone in the boardroom could breathe. Red splashed across the white blouse, dripping onto the conference table like spilled blood on glass. No one moved. Not one of the 10 executives sitting around the polished oak table said a word. Melissa Crane, head of regional operations, still had her hand outstretched, trembling with rage and self-righteousness. Across from her, Naomi Carter did not blink. The cold liquid slid down her sleeve, pooling at her wristwatch. Her silence filled the entire floor. Before we go any further, tell me something. Have you ever watched someone humiliated in front of power and thought if only they knew who they were talking to? Stay with me, because in 15 minutes, every person in this room will learn exactly that. Now, let us rewind 10 seconds before the spill. The meeting had started like any other Wednesday briefing on the 47th floor of Horizon Dynamics. The view outside stretched over the city, sunlight cutting through the glass like interrogation lights. Laptops clicked, coffee steamed, and then, the wrong comment. Melissa leaned across the table, eyes narrowing. Who let the intern sit here? This section is for management. Naomi had introduced herself earlier only as Naomi, wearing no badge, no title, just calm professionalism. She had been invited by corporate audit to observe operations anonymously. No one knew she was the wife of Marcus Carter, the chief executive officer of the entire corporation. I am here for observation, Naomi said softly. Melissa laughed, the kind of laugh that filled silence with superiority. Observation? Sweetheart, this is not some diversity showcase. Go find housekeeping. The laughter that followed was quiet, nervous, complicit. Then came the smoothie. It was not an accident. It was punctuation. Naomi stood still, shoulders straight, eyes steady. The pink liquid soaked her collar, her hairline, her dignity in their eyes, but not in hers. The room held its breath, waiting for her to cry, to shout, to leave. She did none of those. Melissa's voice cracked through the tension. What? No apology for ruining my morning? Naomi's reply was almost a whisper, yet every word carried weight. Are you done? The air changed. The hum of the city below seemed to vanish. The security guard near the door shifted uneasily. Someone coughed. Another looked away. The smell of fruit and fear mixed in the air. Naomi reached for a napkin, wiped the table clean, and placed it gently beside the empty glass. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like she was cataloging every second for evidence. Then she sat down again. No one understood it yet, but the reckoning had already started. And by the time the clock hit 10:15, the people who had laughed would be begging her to speak. The air inside the boardroom stayed heavy, thick with that uneasy silence people use to hide guilt. No one spoke. The red smear on the polished oak table looked almost alive under the fluorescent lights. It was not the juice that stained the morning. It was the arrogance. Naomi Carter sat still, her breathing slow and deliberate. She reached for the napkin again, dabbing her sleeve, not out of shame, but control. Around her, 10 faces tried to look busy. Laptop lids lifted. Pens clicked. Everyone was pretending to type while watching her through lowered eyes. Melissa Crane finally broke the tension. You are going to clean that up, right? She said, voice sharp as broken glass. Or do you need me to call maintenance for you? Naomi looked at her, calm as stone. I already cleaned it. Melissa rolled her eyes. Of course you did. That is what you people are good at. The words dropped like acid. Across the table, one of the younger analysts flinched. His name was Daniel, mid-20s, still new enough to remember decency. He opened his mouth, then closed it. No one wanted to be next. From the far corner, the floor manager Richard cleared his throat. Melissa, let us move on. We have metrics to review. His tone carried that corporate calm that hides fear of HR emails. But Melissa was not done. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on Naomi. Tell me something, sweetheart. Who sent you here? HR? Diversity? Or are you one of those consultants they send to make us look inclusive? Naomi did not answer immediately. She folded the damp napkin, set it neatly in front of her, and said, I am here to observe workplace behavior. That word observe made Melissa laugh. Observe? Honey, you can observe from the hallway. This seat is for management only. She pointed at the chair Naomi sat in like it was a throne she could not bear to see occupied. No one moved to intervene. The company had built its culture on polite avoidance, and in that silence, Naomi could hear every unspoken rule the way people pretended not to see, the way fairness became a slogan instead of a standard. She remembered being 21, fresh out of grad school, walking into her first job interview wearing her best Navy suit. The recruiter never looked at her resume, only at her skin. "We do not think you would fit our client base," he had said. She had smiled politely, then spent 10 years building an empire they could never afford to join. Now she was sitting here again, the same tone, the same eyes, a different stage. Melissa snapped her fingers at the security guard standing by the door. "Derek, can you please escort her out? This meeting is for verified staff." Derek, tall and uncomfortable, hesitated. "Ma'am, I think she is on the guest list." Melissa's voice sharpened. "Do it." Naomi stood before he could move. She adjusted her sleeve, straightened her shoulders, and faced Melissa directly. "You are awfully confident for someone who does not know who is sitting in front of her." The room froze. That single line carried more weight than a shout ever could. Richard shifted in his chair. "Let us not escalate this further," he murmured, but his voice trembled. He knew something was off, something bigger than office politics. Naomi looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. "Do all of you agree with how this conversation went?" No one answered. Only the faint hum of the air conditioning filled the space. "Silence," she said softly, "is a kind of choice, too." Melissa scoffed. "Do not try to make this about race. You just walked into the wrong room, that is all." Naomi tilted her head. The wrong room or the wrong assumption? That question hung in the air like static before a storm. At the far end of the table, the intern, small, nervous, barely 22, had been recording audio on her phone for the meeting minutes. Her hands trembled as she hit pause. The red light blinked off, but not before capturing every word. She glanced at Naomi, then at Melissa, her conscience louder than her fear. "I think she has every right to be here," the intern whispered, barely audible. Melissa turned, sharp and venomous. "Excuse me?" "I said," the intern repeated, stronger this time. "Her name was on the calendar invite." Richard looked up sharply. "It was?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Yes, it was." The guard stepped back, unsure which order to follow. Melissa's confidence wavered for the first time. "Then who exactly are you?" she demanded. Naomi held her gaze, unflinching. "Just someone you will wish you had treated better." "Oh." The lights above flickered once, the way they sometimes do when power shifts in a room. Outside, the elevator bell dinged. Footsteps echoed down the marble hallway, heavy, measured, authoritative. Someone important was approaching. Naomi turned toward the glass wall, the city's skyline reflecting behind her like a mirror of judgment. Her phone vibrated once in her hand. She read the message silently, then slid it into her pocket. Melissa crossed her arms. "Who are you texting? Your lawyer?" Naomi replied. "Something like that." And just like that, the door handle turned. Everyone looked up. The door opened. A man in a tailored gray suit stepped inside, his face unreadable, his presence commanding. The guard straightened instantly. Richard stood up halfway, voice catching in his throat. "Good morning," the man said. His tone was calm but carried authority that did not need introduction. "I heard there was an issue." "Oh," Melissa smiled, thinking she was saved. "Yes, Mr. Carter. Just a minor incident. One of the temps got misplaced." Naomi turned slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time today. The smallest smile touched her lips. "Marcus," she said evenly, "you might want to hear what your team just said to your wife." The room fell into a silence so deep that even the hum of the city below seemed to stop. And for the first time, Melissa Crane realized she was not standing at the top of the hierarchy, she was standing at the edge of her career. For a long moment, no one moved. The sound of the air vent hummed above them like a distant engine, steady and cold. Marcus Carter's gaze swept across the room with the quiet weight of someone who was used to being obeyed before he even spoke. He was calm, sharply dressed, but there was something in his eyes that made the space feel smaller, as if the walls themselves were aware of what was coming. Naomi stood beside him, still wearing the pink stain on her blouse like a badge. The mark was no longer humiliation, it was evidence. Melissa's confident smile collapsed as realization began to sink in. Your wife?" she stammered. Marcus turned his attention toward her. "Yes, my wife. And from what I have just heard, she was assaulted and humiliated by one of my own employees in my own company." The words landed with a precision that felt surgical, each syllable clean, cold, final. Richard, the manager, looked pale. "Sir, This was all a misunderstanding. No one knew who she was. Marcus's tone did not rise, yet it silenced him completely. You did not need to know who she was to treat her with respect. Across the table, Daniel's fingers twitched near his keyboard, pretending to type something just to avoid eye contact. The intern's phone trembled slightly in her hand. She had forgotten to stop the recording again. Melissa swallowed hard. Sir, I never meant any harm. I was just defending company policy. Naomi finally spoke. You poured a drink on me, called me a cleaner, and ordered security to remove me. Which policy was that? Melissa's jaw opened, then closed again. The silence that followed was more painful than shouting. Marcus walked toward the end of the table, placing both hands on the polished surface. His reflection shimmered in the glass like another version of himself, colder, distant. Every policy in this company was written to protect dignity, he said. But it seems dignity is only extended to certain faces. Richard stepped forward. Mr. Carter, I can assure you this is not representative of Horizon Dynamics. Marcus looked at him, then at Naomi. You are right. It is not representative of the company I built, but it is exactly representative of the culture you have allowed to grow. The sentence hit harder than a shout. The manager stepped back, deflated. Naomi looked around the table again. When I walked in here, not one of you spoke up. Not when she insulted me, not when she called security. Some of you even laughed. I took note of every single face. The intern, her name tag read Mina, spoke softly, barely above a whisper. I tried to say something. Naomi turned to her, her expression softening for the first time. I know, and that is what matters. You saw something wrong and did not look away. Melissa shifted, her voice shaking now. Sir, please, it was an emotional overreaction. You know how pressure can... Marcus cut her off. Do not hide cruelty behind pressure. Pressure reveals character. It does not excuse it. Oh, he straightened, adjusting his cufflinks with the calm of a man who had done this too many times before, disciplined by disappointment, not rage. Mr. Carter, Richard said quietly, I take full responsibility. Let me handle this internally. Marcus met his eyes. You already did. You watched it happen. Outside the glass wall, the skyline glowed under the mid-morning Sunday. From this high up, the city looked peaceful, but inside the room, peace was a memory. Naomi's phone buzzed once in her hand. She ignored it. Her eyes stayed on Melissa. Do you remember what you said to me? You told me I did not belong here. Melissa's lips parted, but Naomi continued before she could answer. You were right. I do not belong in this room. I belong above it. The line cut cleanly through the tension. Even Marcus's jaw tightened with restrained pride. The guard, Derek, stood by the door, unsure whether to leave or stay. Marcus turned toward him. Thank you for not following that order, that will be noted. Yes, sir, Derek replied quietly. Marcus faced the table again. I have spent 20 years building this company from nothing. We built it to stand for integrity, for equality, for opportunity. But somewhere between the spreadsheets and the bonuses, we forgot the simplest rule, respect. No one dared move. Naomi leaned forward slightly. When power forgets empathy, it creates rooms like this. Oh. Melissa took a step back, her voice barely holding together. Please, Mr. Carter, if you could just give me a chance to... He raised his hand, stopping her. I am not interested in apologies crafted for damage control. I am interested in accountability. He turned to Naomi. What do you want to do? She looked down at the red stain on her sleeve, then back up at the group. I want them to remember this moment, not for fear of losing their jobs, but for understanding what it costs to lose their humanity. Marcus nodded once, slowly. Fair. He pulled out his phone, typed a short message, and placed it face down on the table. 30 seconds later, the door opened again. A woman from corporate compliance stepped in, holding a tablet. Mr. Carter, the incident file has been logged and the footage uploaded to the ethics board. They are requesting a live call. Connect it, Marcus said. Melissa's face turned white. Footage? Naomi replied calmly. Every room on this floor records for transparency. You did not just humiliate a woman, you did it on camera. The compliance officer projected the footage onto the glass wall. There it was, the splash, the insults, the silence, the reflection of every face that had chosen comfort over courage. Melissa covered her mouth with her hand. Oh, God. Marcus' voice stayed calm. I believe in second chances, but not for first-degree disrespect. Richard finally spoke, barely audible. What happens now? Marcus looked at Naomi. You tell me. She inhaled slowly, the rhythm steady as her heartbeat. We start with accountability. Suspension for every manager who failed to intervene. Diversity retraining for the entire division. And a personal apology to every employee who has been dismissed or belittled for existing in this space. Oh? Marcus turned to the compliance officer. Make it happen. She nodded. Yes, sir. Then Naomi added, and one more thing. Melissa looked up, hopeful. Naomi's tone stayed calm, deliberate. That smoothie you threw? You are going to clean the table yourself before you pack your desk. The silence that followed was not cold. This time it was judgment. Marcus stood beside his wife, both of them unshaken. Meeting adjourned, he said. Naomi looked once more at the table, at the stain now drying under the light. She took a breath, not of relief, but of closure. Justice, in that room, did not roar. It whispered, and everyone heard it. No one in the room moved after the word adjourned. The sound of it seemed to echo against the glass walls, slow and final. Melissa Crane stood frozen beside the conference table, the empty smoothie glass still there like a piece of evidence. The rest of the team looked anywhere but at her. Papers rustled, chairs shifted, but it was all nervous noise trying to fill the shame that hung in the air. Naomi Carter did not rush to leave. She stayed where she was, composed, her eyes sweeping across every face in the room. Do not mistake quiet for weakness, she said softly. Sometimes quiet is just power waiting for its turn. The compliance officer from corporate, a woman named Clarissa Hayes, kept typing notes on her tablet, her voice steady. Documentation complete. The suspension notices will be sent within the hour. The ethics board has requested a follow-up interview with all present. Marcus Carter nodded. Make sure the recording is stored in the permanent file. This is not just a case. It is a reflection. Melissa tried to speak. Sir, please, Naomi interrupted gently, without looking at her. Not sir. Say it to me. Melissa hesitated. Mrs. Carter, I am sorry. Naomi turned her head slowly. Sorry for what? For being caught? For losing your composure? Or for finally being forced to see who was watching? Melissa's throat worked, but no words came. Her cheeks flushed red against the harsh white light. Marcus adjusted his tie, the movement small but commanding. Clarissa, I want a full internal review of every discrimination report filed in this branch over the past 2 years. Every unresolved complaint, every ignored email, I want them all reopened. Yes, Mr. Carter, Clarissa said. That will take some time. Then start now, he replied. We are done pretending these are isolated incidents. The words landed like stones in water, sending ripples through every conscience in the room. Daniel, the young analyst, cleared his throat. Sir, Mr. Carter, I have seen things microaggressions, comments. I never said anything because I thought it was not my place. Naomi looked at him, not unkindly. It is always your place when silence protects harm. He nodded, ashamed. I understand that now. The intern, Mina, who had recorded the meeting, stepped forward cautiously. Mrs. Carter, I still have the audio file. Would you like me to forward it to the ethics board? Naomi smiled faintly. Keep it for now. You did the right thing, and I appreciate that. Sometimes the smallest voice is the only honest one in the room. Melissa exhaled shakily. I swear I did not mean to hurt anyone. It was just a bad moment. Naomi studied her. Bad moments do not pour drinks on people. Bad systems do, and people like you keep them running. Marcus's phone buzzed. He read the message briefly and set it face down on the table again. The board chair is watching the footage right now. They have already issued a directive for immediate leadership training across all divisions. Richard, still standing near the projector screen, finally found his voice. Mr. Carter, may I address the team? Marcus gestured for him to continue. Richard faced his staff, eyes heavy. We failed today. Not just Melissa, not just management, all of us. We failed to act, we failed to speak, and we failed to remember what this company was supposed to represent. He turned to Naomi. Mrs. Carter, I owe you an apology for not stopping it the moment it started. I froze. I thought it would blow over. I was wrong. Naomi inclined her head slightly. Acknowledgement is a beginning. Let us hope it does not end there. Clarissa's voice interrupted softly. The board requests both of you, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, to attend a live stream review for policy reform later this afternoon. Marcus nodded once. We will be there. Naomi looked around the room one last time. The faces staring back at her were no longer smug or superior. They were frightened. guilty, or quietly inspired. The hierarchy had been rearranged without a single shout. Then she turned toward Melissa. "Clean it," Naomi said quietly. Melissa blinked. "What?" "The table," Naomi repeated. "Clean it. You made the mess. You finish it." For a moment, Melissa did not move. Then, with trembling hands, she reached for the napkin. The room watched in silence as she wiped the red smear from the wood grain. The sound of the paper dragging across the surface was louder than any apology. When she was done, Naomi picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Marcus followed, his hand resting lightly on her back. But just before stepping out, Naomi paused. She turned to the intern. "Mina, walk with us." The young woman startled. "Me?" "Yes, you are coming to the policy meeting. People like you should be in the room when the rules are rewritten." Mina nodded, eyes wide, clutching her phone like proof that truth still mattered. As the three of them stepped into the hallway, the door closed behind them with a soft click. Inside, the rest of the team stood in uneasy silence. Richard looked at Melissa, who now sat with her head in her hands. "You just poured juice on the owner's wife," he said quietly. "You do realize what this means?" Melissa's voice was barely audible. "It means I am finished." Clarissa typed one last note into her tablet. "Suspension effective immediately. You will receive formal notice by email." Marcus and Naomi walked down the marble corridor side by side. The hallway stretched long and bright, lined with company awards and framed photos of smiling executives. Naomi's reflection passed over them, her image replacing theirs for just a second as she walked by. Marcus broke the silence. "You handled that with grace." Naomi smiled faintly. "Grace is not forgiveness. It is control." He nodded. "You have always had both." They stopped near the elevator. Through the glass wall, the city buzzed far below, tiny cars crawling through morning traffic. Naomi looked down at them, then back at her husband. "Do you remember what you told me when you started this company?" she asked. He smiled slightly. "That I wanted to build a place where everyone could belong." She tilted her head. "Then maybe today is the real beginning." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. As they stepped inside, Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for not walking away," he said quietly. Naomi's eyes stayed fixed on the closing doors. Walking away would have been easy, but easy never changes anything. The doors slid shut, cutting off the bright hallway behind them. Inside the elevator, the reflection of husband and wife stood together composed, powerful, unbroken. Downstairs, in the lobby, employees began receiving alerts on their tablets. Emergency ethics review, all departments, immediate attendance required. Change had already started moving through the building, quiet but unstoppable, like justice wearing heels instead of armor. The elevator descended in silence, humming softly between the floors. The reflection of Naomi and Marcus Carter glimmered on the brushed steel doors, two figures still and calm, yet charged with a quiet storm. Naomi's blouse was nearly dry now. The pink stain faded into a darker hue, a reminder of the moment that had exposed far more than prejudice. Marcus glanced at her. "You sure you want to go through with the full review today?" She nodded without hesitation. "Yes. The mess started in that room, but it does not end there. It ends where the system bends." The elevator doors opened to the ground floor lobby. A crowd had begun forming near the reception area, employees whispering in low voices, glancing at their tablets. Every screen displayed the same message in bold red letters: Mandatory Ethics Assembly, 10 minutes. Attendance required. Naomi stepped out first. The rhythm of her heels on marble echoed through the space. Heads turned. Some employees recognized her from photos on the internal site, though few had ever seen her in person. A woman in a coffee-colored blazer nudged her coworker. "That is her. That is Mrs. Carter." Marcus followed, his expression unreadable. He approached the front desk where the receptionist stood stiffly behind the counter, eyes darting from him to Naomi. "Auditorium A," he said simply. "Make sure every department lead is present." "Yes, Mr. Carter," the receptionist stammered. The news spread quickly. Within minutes, the elevator doors kept opening and closing, releasing clusters of staff who moved like a tide toward the large glass auditorium at the center of the building. The atmosphere was electric, not loud, but trembling with anticipation. Everyone had seen the internal memo. Incident recorded on 40, 7th floor. Live review pending. Naomi stood at the entrance for a moment, watching the flow of people. Her face was calm, but her thoughts churned beneath the surface. How many times had this happened before? How many times had someone walked away humiliated because no one stood up? Marcus leaned close. We can make them listen, but you are the one they need to hear. Naomi took a deep breath. Then let us make sure they remember it. Inside the auditorium, more than 200 employees filled the seats. The curved wall behind the stage doubled as a projection screen, already glowing with the Horizon Dynamics logo. Clarissa, the compliance officer, stood near the front, tapping on her tablet to sync the recorded footage. When Naomi and Marcus entered, the room fell silent. Clarissa looked up. The board is connected, she said softly. They are watching live from New York. Marcus took the podium first. His voice carried easily without a microphone. Good morning, everyone. What you are about to watch is not training material. It is truth. It is what happens when decency is replaced by ego and when silence is mistaken for professionalism. He stepped aside. Clarissa pressed a button. The screen filled with the footage from the conference room, Melissa's voice shouting, the splash of the smoothie, Naomi's composure, the stunned faces. Every word echoed through the speakers. You people, maintenance, intern. Gasps rippled through the audience. Some covered their mouths. Others stared at the floor, ashamed by what they were witnessing. Naomi did not look away. She watched it all again, not for anger, but for proof. When the video ended, the lights brightened slightly. Marcus turned back to the audience. That happened in this building, in our culture, under our leadership. We are not here to punish one person. We are here to confront all of us. Then he gestured to Naomi. My wife has something to say. Yeah. She walked slowly to the podium. Every eye in the room followed her, and for a second, the entire building seemed to hold its breath. I walked into that meeting as an observer, Naomi began. Her voice was clear, resonant, and steady. I wanted to see how people treat others when they believe no one is watching. What I found was not a few bad apples. What I found was a system that still whispers the same lie, that some people belong more than others. The room stayed perfectly still. I have been in your position before, she continued. I have sat in rooms where my ideas were ignored until someone else repeated them louder. I have been called too confident, too quiet, too much, and each time I smiled. I adapted, and I told myself it was just how the world worked. She paused. But it should not be. An older man in the front row shifted uncomfortably. A woman near the back dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Naomi went on. Every one of you who saw that video and said, I would have done something, ask yourself, would you? When someone is humiliated in front of you, do you step forward, or do you look away and hope it ends quickly? Because silence is not neutral. Silence is permission. A murmur spread through the crowd, not disagreement, but the sound of recognition. Marcus watched her, pride flickering behind his calm expression. Naomi turned toward the screen again. The woman you saw throwing that drink has been suspended, but I do not want you to leave here thinking justice was served because one person lost her job. Justice is not a single act. It is a culture built choice by choice, voice by voice. Clarissa raised her tablet. The board chair would like to address the floor. A voice came through the speakers, formal and deliberate. On behalf of Horizon's Executive Council, we commend the transparency shown by Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Effective immediately, a new department will be established under Mrs. Carter's leadership, the Office of Equity and Integrity. Every employee, regardless of rank, will complete certification under her oversight. The crowd broke into quiet applause, hesitant but sincere. Naomi's eyes softened. Thank you, but applause is not what fixes this. Action does. Marcus stepped up beside her. Starting today, Horizon will be rebuilt on one principle: dignity first. Every manager in this building will be evaluated not only on performance, but on humanity. He looked at his wife. And I could not think of anyone better to lead that than the woman who reminded us what real power looks like. The applause grew louder, this time carrying conviction instead of guilt. Naomi smiled faintly and nodded. We are done with pretending equality exists because it is written in a handbook. We will prove it exists by how we treat each other when no one is watching. As the employees stood, the lights in the auditorium rose slowly, washing the room in white. Outside, sunlight spilled across the glass walls, catching on the city skyline. The stain on Naomi's blouse was still visible, faint but unforgotten like history itself, marked but no longer defining her. She stepped down from the podium. Marcus offered his hand, but she shook her head with a quiet smile. "I can walk," she said. And as she did, the room rose to its feet, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of respect. For the first time that day, silence did not feel like oppression. It felt like honor. When the assembly ended, the crowd left the auditorium in slow, hushed waves. The hallway outside was filled with a strange quiet, not the usual rush of meetings and chatter, but something heavier, reflective. People spoke in low tones, avoiding eye contact, as though they had all just witnessed something sacred and uncomfortable at the same time. Naomi Carter stood near the exit, shaking hands with a few employees who approached cautiously. Some looked ashamed, some grateful, some still unsure of what to say. A woman from accounting whispered, "Thank you for saying what we could not." Naomi gave a small nod. "Now you can. That is how it changes." Marcus Carter watched her from a few feet away, arms folded. The pride on his face was tempered by something deeper concern, maybe even guilt. He had spent decades building this empire, yet it took one morning to see how much had been buried beneath success. Clarissa Hayes, the compliance officer, approached them with her tablet clutched to her chest. "The board is requesting a detailed report within 48 hours, she said. "They want interviews from at least 10 employees who were present during the incident." Naomi's tone was calm. "Good. Let them speak freely. No script, no coaching. I want raw truth." Clarissa hesitated. "Mrs. Carter, some people are nervous. They think their statements might affect their positions." Naomi turned to her. "If honesty costs them a job, then this company is still broken. Tell them that from me." Clarissa nodded, clearly moved. "Yes, ma'am." She hurried off, heels tapping sharply on the tile floor. Marcus exhaled. "You realize this is going to make waves, right? The press will get wind of it. Stockholders will call." Naomi glanced at him, a flicker of challenge in her eyes. "Then let them call. Maybe it is time they know what integrity looks like when it is not for sale." Before Marcus could respond, a young man approached nervously. It was Daniel, the analyst from the meeting. He looked like he had not exhaled since the incident. "Mrs. Carter," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you for what you said up there. I think I needed to hear it more than anyone." Naomi smiled faintly. "Then do something with it. When you see it happen again, use your voice, even if it shakes." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." As Daniel walked away, Marcus turned toward the glass wall overlooking the city. "You know," he said softly, "when I started Horizon, I thought I could build a place immune to prejudice. I hired the best people, paid fairly, built policies that looked perfect on paper. But you were right. The problem does not live in policy, it lives in people." Naomi joined him, her reflection merging with his in the glass. "Policies are mirrors. They only show you what is already in the room." They stood in silence for a moment. Down below, traffic crawled through the streets, unaware of the storm that had just broken on the 47th floor. Then a voice called from behind them. It was Mina, the intern. She jogged toward them, clutching her phone. "Mrs. Carter, I have something to show you." Naomi turned. "What is it?" Mina held up her screen. "The video from the meeting, someone leaked it. It is already online. Thousands of views." Marcus frowned. "Who posted it?" "I do not know," Mina said. "It is all over social media. People are sharing it with the caption, 'Grace under fire.'" Naomi took the phone. The thumbnail image showed her standing in the boardroom, shoulders straight, smoothie dripping from her blouse, eyes steady. She pressed play. Her own voice filled the air. "Are you done?" Then the room's silence. Then Melissa's sneer. Then the reveal. The comment section below the video scrolled endlessly, some horrified, some inspired. "This is what leadership looks like." Unbelievable that this still happens in 2025. She did not even raise her voice. "Iconic." Marcus watched her face. "Do you want it taken down?" Naomi thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, let them see it. Every woman, every person who has ever been told they did not belong, they deserve to see what power looks like when it refuses to break." Mina's eyes brightened. "I think people already see it, ma'am. They are calling you the silent CEO's wife." And Naomi smiled faintly. "They will learn soon enough that silence was never the point. It was restraint." Marcus put a hand on Mina's shoulder. "You did good work, Mina. Keep that file secure. The board might request the original." "Yes, sir," Mina said proudly. "And Mrs. Carter, for what it is worth, I want to work in your new department someday. You already are, Naomi replied. Every person who chooses truth works for me now. After Mina left, Marcus's phone vibrated again. He read the message silently, then looked at Naomi. The legal team wants a meeting this afternoon. They think we should prepare a statement for the media. Naomi nodded. Fine. But it will not be the usual corporate apology. No passive words. No hiding behind phrases like unfortunate event or isolated incident. I want the truth written plain. What do you want it to say? He asked. Naomi faced the lobby windows where sunlight poured in, bright and relentless. Say this, she began slowly. A company cannot claim greatness if its greatness depends on silence. Horizon Dynamics stands for dignity, not damage control. Marcus smiled slightly. That sounds like something our PR team cannot polish. Exactly, Naomi said. For once, I want them to choke on honesty. They started walking toward the executive wing. Employees stepped aside as they passed, murmuring greetings tinged with a mixture of awe and guilt. Naomi acknowledged them with quiet nods, her posture straight but her presence warm. As they neared the glass corridor, Marcus slowed his pace. You know, he said quietly, there will be backlash. Some will say you embarrassed the company. Naomi glanced at him. I did not embarrass the company. I reminded it who it is supposed to be. They entered the executive suite, a wide hall of glass offices and white walls. At the end stood Marcus's door-frosted glass with the silver plaque reading Marcus J. Carter, Chief Executive Officer. Naomi looked at it, then turned to him. Maybe it is time that sign had two names, she said softly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Naomi smiled. I have never been more sure. He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Then let us make it official. As the door closed behind them, the chatter in the hallway rose like a distant current. Employees whispered the same name over and over, half in disbelief, half in pride. Naomi Carter. Upstairs, a maintenance worker entered the now empty boardroom. He paused at the table where the stain had been. It was gone, wiped clean. But when he looked closely, he could still see a faint pink shimmer under the light. He smiled quietly to himself. Some stains, he thought, are not meant to be erased. They are meant to remind. And as he switched off the lights, the reflection of that spotless table gleamed like a promise that the next meeting held inside this room would start with something Horizon Dynamics had just relearned respect. By the time afternoon sunlight spilled across the upper floors, Horizon Dynamics no longer felt like the same company. The air itself carried a hum of tension, but beneath it was something new, an awareness, a shift. Emails were flying, calendars rearranged, managers whispering about new oversight and upcoming interviews. The incident had spread faster than any press release could catch it. Inside the executive suite, Naomi Carter sat across from Marcus in his office, the skyline behind them glowing gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She had changed into a clean white blouse, but the faint mark of red juice still lingered on her skin near her wrist. Marcus noticed it as she reached for a glass of water. Does it still bother you? He asked quietly. Naomi looked at the mark, then back at him. No, she said. It reminds me why we started this. Some lessons are better when they leave a trace. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Public Relations drafted a statement. They want you to approve it before we release it to the press. Naomi opened the folder he slid toward her. She read the opening line aloud. Horizon Dynamics regrets the misunderstanding that occurred earlier today. She stopped, then looked up sharply. A misunderstanding? That is what they are calling it? Marcus sighed. You know how PR works. They try to soften the blow. She closed the folder. There is no misunderstanding in bigotry, Marcus. There is only arrogance and choice. Rewrite it. He nodded slowly. Then what should it say? Naomi took a deep breath. Say the truth. Say that this company witnessed discrimination at its highest level and chose to confront it in daylight. Say that we are not proud of what happened, but we are proud that it will never be hidden again. Marcus smiled faintly. You realize that will make headlines tomorrow. I hope it does, she said. Maybe it will make someone out there a little less afraid to speak. A knock interrupted them. Clarissa entered, holding her tablet like a shield. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, the board meeting is about to start. The video has reached over 4 million views. Media outlets are already requesting interviews. Naomi's eyebrows lifted slightly. 4 million? Clarissa nodded. Yes, ma'am. It has sparked a national conversation about workplace dignity. The hashtags are everywhere. Marcus stood. Then let us give them something worth listening to. Oh. They walked together into the board conference room, a larger, sleeker version of the one upstairs, lined with screens displaying the faces of remote executives from across the country. The board chair, an older man named Henry Langford, appeared on the central monitor. His voice carried the weight of decades. "Marcus, Naomi," he began, "I will not waste your time. What happened today has already reached investors. The footage is undeniable. Some are worried about reputation damage." Naomi clasped her hands on the table. "Reputation is not damaged by truth. It is damaged by pretending truth does not exist." Henry gave a small nod, studying her. "You are right. But you must understand, some shareholders are uneasy with how this was handled. They feel it should have been contained quietly." Marcus's tone was steady. "Respectfully, Henry, containment is what created this problem. We buried too much for too long." The room went silent. Finally, Henry sighed. "Then tell me what comes next. The world is watching." Naomi leaned forward slightly. "We rebuild, starting with leadership accountability. Every executive, including this board, will complete an independent ethics assessment. We will open anonymous reporting channels directly to my office, and we will release the findings publicly." A murmur spread through the digital screens. One executive said, "That could expose us to lawsuits." Naomi replied without hesitation, "Transparency is not a liability. Secrecy is." Henry stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You have my support, Mrs. Carter. Proceed." The meeting continued with logistical updates, deadlines, compliance discussions. But as Naomi listened, her mind wandered briefly back to her 24-year-old self standing outside a job interview, clutching a resume no one wanted to read because her name did not sound like it fit the culture. She had walked away that day feeling invisible. Now she sat at the head of a board that could change that culture forever. When the meeting ended, Henry said one final thing. "Naomi, this company will remember today for a long time. You could have stayed silent. You could have walked away, but you did not." Naomi met his eyes. "Because silence was never safety. It was just another form of surrender." The screens went dark. Marcus turned to her. "You handled them better than I ever could." She smiled faintly. "You built the foundation. I just reminded them why it mattered." As they stepped out into the hallway, the buzz of activity had intensified. Reporters were waiting downstairs, cameras already gathering outside the building. Clarissa rushed after them. "The press is in the lobby. Do you want me to hold them off?" Naomi shook her head. "No. Let them in. I will speak to them myself." Marcus hesitated. "Are you sure?" She met his gaze. "This story does not belong to me anymore. It belongs to everyone who has ever been told to stay quiet." They took the elevator down together. When the doors opened, flashes of cameras exploded in bursts of light. A dozen reporters called her name. "Mrs. Carter, how do you feel about the viral video? Do you think this will change corporate America? Was it staged?" Naomi lifted a hand gently, signaling for calm. The crowd quieted just enough for her voice to carry. "I do not speak for headlines," she said clearly. "I speak for anyone who has been underestimated. What happened today should not shock anyone. It should remind everyone. Respect is not optional. It is the price of entry for being human." The room went still again. Even the camera shutters paused. Marcus stood beside her but said nothing. He knew this was her moment. Naomi continued, her voice unwavering. "I am not angry. I am not even surprised. I am resolved. And I will spend every day making sure that what you saw in that video becomes impossible to repeat." The reporters erupted in questions, but Naomi had already turned away. She walked through the lobby doors, sunlight pouring over her like a spotlight that needed no stage. Outside, across the street, a group of young women stood watching with tears in their eyes. One of them whispered, "That is her." Another said, "She did not just talk. She changed everything." "Oh." Naomi glanced at them and smiled softly before getting into the car waiting at the curb. As the vehicle pulled into traffic, Marcus looked over at her. "You know this will not end today." Naomi's gaze stayed on the city passing by. "Good," she said quietly. "Justice should never end. It should evolve." The car moved forward through the sunlight, and for the first time in a long time, the reflection on every glass building they passed looked different, not colder, not distant, but bright, with the quiet possibility that maybe, finally, the world had started to listen. By the time evening shadows reached the glass facade of Horizon Dynamics, the entire city knew her name. Every news channel carried the same story. Corporate racism exposed at Horizon CEO's wife takes stand for dignity. It played on elevators, on tablets in cafes, on the silent screens of airports. People watched the clip in break rooms and whispered, "She never even raised her voice." Inside the Carter residence, the world felt quieter, but the energy of the day still lingered like static in the air. Their home was modern yet warm, filled with earth tones, tall windows, and the distant hum of city traffic. Naomi sat at the kitchen island with her laptop open, scrolling through hundreds of emails, some from strangers, others from old colleagues, even former classmates she had not heard from in years. Each message carried a story. "I was the only black woman in my department for 3 years. Today I finally filed a complaint. Thank you for showing that grace does not mean silence. You made me believe change is possible again." Naomi's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. She read each one, then folded her hands together, breathing slowly. "So many people," she murmured. Marcus entered the room, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He carried 2 mugs of tea and placed one beside her. "You have been reading those for an hour," he said gently. "You do not have to carry every story tonight." She looked up at him. "I am not carrying them. I am collecting them. They are proof this was not about one room or one company. It is everywhere." He nodded, sitting opposite her. "That is what scares me. You have become the face of something bigger than we can control." Naomi smiled faintly. "Good. Control is how they kept it quiet for so long." Marcus chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You always know how to turn fear into strategy." Before Naomi could respond, her phone buzzed. It was Clarissa, the compliance officer. She answered immediately. "Clarissa?" "Mrs. Carter, sorry to disturb you after hours," Clarissa said, her voice steady but urgent. "We have an issue. Someone leaked internal documents to the media records of discrimination reports that were ignored by management over the past 2 years." Naomi's tone did not change. "How many cases?" "At least 23 confirmed so far," Clarissa replied. "Most from the same division. The press already has copies. They are publishing tonight." Marcus exhaled sharply. "That division again?" Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do we know who leaked them?" "Not yet," Clarissa said. "But judging by the metadata, it came from inside our system." Naomi paused for a moment, thinking. "Do not try to suppress it. Let them release it." Clarissa sounded surprised. "Ma'am, are you sure? It could hurt the company's valuation." Naomi's voice remained calm, deliberate. "Truth never hurts a company that intends to heal. It only hurts the ones still pretending." Ugh. Clarissa was silent for a moment before saying quietly, "Understood." When the call ended, Marcus leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "This is going to be a storm, Naomi. The investors will panic. The media will spin it." Naomi closed the laptop. "Then let them. For once, the spin will point to the truth." They sat in silence for a few seconds. The city lights outside painted soft reflections on the glass walls, casting moving shadows across their faces. Marcus broke the quiet first. "You know, when I met you, I told myself I was marrying someone calm, someone who would keep me grounded." Naomi smiled, her eyes soft but unwavering. "And look at you now, more grounded than ever." He laughed, the sound breaking the heaviness of the room. "You are impossible to argue with. That is why we built something worth keeping," she said. Their moment was interrupted by another sound, an alert from the living room television. The screen flashed with breaking news. Horizon files expose long-term discrimination reports ignored by executives. The reporter's voice filled the room. The documents suggest a pattern of systemic bias across several departments, raising questions about leadership accountability. Naomi stood, watching the broadcast. The anchor continued, "In a statement earlier today, Mrs. Naomi Carter, wife of CEO Marcus Carter and current head of the new Office of Equity and Integrity, said that transparency would be the cornerstone of Horizon's new era." The reporter paused, then added, "And it appears she meant every word." Marcus lowered the volume. "They are framing you as the reformer, the hero." Naomi turned to him. "Then let me be clear. I do not want to be anyone's hero. I want to be the proof that systems can be rebuilt." He studied her face. "And if that proof costs us everything?" Naomi met his gaze without hesitation. "Then it will be worth the price." Her phone vibrated again this time. A text message from an unknown number. She opened it. The message read, "We believe in you. We are ready to speak up." Attached were 10 anonymous testimonials from employees who had experienced harassment, all from the same department that had been exposed. Naomi looked up at Marcus. "They are ready." He nodded. "Then tomorrow we start again." She smiled faintly. "No. Tomorrow they start. We have already begun." Later that night, after Marcus went upstairs, Naomi stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched below neon, movement, life. Somewhere out there, people were talking about her, about what she had done, but she did not think of herself. She thought of every person whose voice had been dismissed, every apology that came too late, every meeting where silence felt safer than truth. The night air was cool, brushing against her face. A memory surfaced, her grandmother's voice from long ago, soft and steady. "They will call you angry when you are honest. They will call you difficult when you are firm. But they will call you leader when they realize you were right." Naomi whispered to the night, "I hope you are watching, Grandma. I hope you are proud." From the street below, a car passed slowly, its radio playing faintly news coverage, repeating her name. Naomi closed her eyes and let the sound drift upward. In another part of the city, Melissa Crane sat alone in her apartment, staring at the same broadcast. Her career was over, her inbox filled with messages of outrage and threats. Yet as she watched Naomi speak on television, calm, composed, powerful, Melissa felt something unexpected. Guilt, yes, but also understanding. For the first time, she saw what she had refused to see, that dignity does not demand status, and that cruelty never wins quietly. Back on the balcony, Naomi whispered a final thought into the wind. "This is not revenge. This is repair." The city lights shimmered below, endless and alive. And as the night deepened, the first real wave of change began to move, not from the boardroom, not from the headlines, but from the people who had finally found their voices. The next morning dawned pale and heavy with mist, as though the city itself was holding its breath. The news cycle had not slowed. If anything, it had accelerated. Every major network replayed the footage of Naomi Carter standing in that boardroom, her poise and restraint now a national conversation. Pundits debated what it meant for corporate culture, while headlines used words like revolutionary, fearless, and unapologetic. Inside the Carter residence, the house was still except for the soft clinking of dishes. Naomi sat by the window, sipping coffee while reading a freshly printed report. The headline on the front page of the business section read, "Horizon Dynamics becomes ground zero for corporate reform." Beneath it, her own image stared back at her, captured mid-sentence, eyes steady, mouth firm. Marcus entered the room already dressed in a dark suit. He stopped when he saw her expression. "You are reading the papers?" She nodded. "I prefer to see how they write it before I hear how they twist it." Marcus gave a small smile. "You are trending on every platform, Naomi. They are calling it the Carter effect." Naomi set the newspaper down. "I did not ask for a name. I asked for change." He moved closer, resting his hand on her shoulder. "Change needs a face. Whether you like it or not, they chose yours." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Clarissa's name appeared on the screen. Naomi answered immediately. "Good morning, Clarissa." "Mrs. Carter," Clarissa said quickly, "we have an urgent situation. 3 employees from the exposed division have requested private meetings with you. They claim they have additional evidence of misconduct, financial this time." Naomi's tone sharpened. "Financial?" "Yes, ma'am," Clarissa replied. "They say discriminatory promotions were tied to under-the-table bonuses. If that is true, this goes beyond ethics, it is criminal." Naomi stood, her chair sliding softly against the hardwood floor. "Set up the meeting for 11 o'clock. No board members, no press, just us." Marcus looked at her, eyebrows raised. "You are walking into another fire." She turned to him with a calm expression. "Then I will bring the water." By 11 o'clock, Naomi was seated in her new office at Horizon, formerly a corner suite that belonged to the chief operations officer. The glass walls had been refrosted for privacy, and a single phrase now appeared etched above the doorway. "Integrity is not negotiable." Clarissa entered first, followed by 3 employees, a man in his 40s named Jerome, a younger woman named Talia, and a nervous-looking junior accountant named Evan. They each clutched folders, their hands tight around them as though they were carrying something fragile. "Please," Naomi said, gesturing to the chairs opposite her desk. You are safe here. Tell me what you know. Jerome spoke first. Mrs. Carter, after yesterday, people started talking. I worked in that division for 6 years. There were bonus discrepancies, big ones. Promotions that went to the same circle of people every single quarter. I questioned it once, and I was told to stop asking if I wanted to keep my position. Naomi leaned forward slightly. Do you have documentation? He nodded and slid a folder across the desk. Inside were spreadsheets, timestamps, and internal memos. Naomi's eyes flicked over the numbers. Each figure told a quiet, undeniable story. Talia spoke next. They said diversity hires were too expensive. They adjusted salaries down on paperwork, but not on record. I only found out because I worked in payroll. Naomi looked up sharply. So they manipulated the compensation system. Yes, Talia said, her voice trembling. And they made sure the victims would never see the real numbers. Oh, Evan finally spoke, his voice thin but steady. There is more. They deleted files from the financial archive last month, right after the internal review notice was announced. Clarissa took notes rapidly. We can recover those backups from the server. I will contact IT immediately. Naomi stood and walked to the window. The city stretched beneath her, thousands of workers, thousands of stories just like these. What you have done today, she said, turning back to them, took courage. You did not just speak for yourselves. You spoke for everyone who has ever been silenced by fear. Jerome shifted uneasily. We are scared, Mrs. Carter. They will know it was us. Naomi stepped closer, her voice quiet but firm. Then they will also know who stands with you. You have my protection. The 3 employees exchanged glances of disbelief, as if they had forgotten what it felt like to be believed. After they left, Clarissa turned to Naomi. What now? Naomi closed the folder and said, We prepare a full report for the Federal Ethics Commission. If this company wants to prove integrity, it starts by cleaning its own foundation. Clarissa hesitated. You realize once this goes public, we will face lawsuits, stock drops, maybe even federal hearings. Naomi looked her straight in the eye. Clarissa, progress does not come cheap. If the cost of integrity is a few $1,000,000, then it is still a bargain. Oh. A soft chime from Naomi's laptop interrupted them. A new email had arrived from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, They are watching you. Clarissa's eyebrows furrowed. Do you want me to trace it? Naomi shook her head. No. Let them watch. I want them to see what accountability looks like. That afternoon, while Clarissa worked with the IT department to secure the data, Naomi returned to the 47th floor, the same floor where it had all begun. The conference room was empty now, spotless, almost too clean. She walked slowly around the table, fingers grazing the polished wood. Her reflection followed her in the glass, calm and unshaken. But inside, she felt the weight of the moment pressing on her ribs, the awareness that every step forward in justice was followed by resistance. Marcus joined her a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You are still here, he said. I wanted to see the room again, she replied, to remember what it looked like before the truth filled it. He handed her a cup. You are making enemies. Naomi sipped the coffee, her eyes never leaving the skyline. Then they will have to live with that. I am done making peace with wrong. Marcus studied her for a moment. You know what I see when I look at you? She smiled faintly. A troublemaker? He shook his head. A builder. And sometimes builders have to break the old walls first. Naomi turned to face him fully. Then let us start demolition. Outside, the sky was turning from gray to gold, sunlight flooding the glass walls. The city glowed beneath them, unaware of the meeting that would soon shake another corner of power. Inside that room, once a chamber of humiliation, stood a woman who had transformed disgrace into direction, silence into command. And as the light touched her face, Naomi Carter knew that the fight was no longer about her. It was about everyone who had ever been told to sit quietly while the world looked away, and she would not let it look away again. The next day arrived like the calm before a storm, bright, almost deceptive in its peace. From the outside, Horizon Dynamics appeared flawless, its mirrored tower gleaming in the sunlight, the company logo catching every ray like a promise. But inside, tension pulsed through the building like an invisible current. Every hallway buzzed with whispers. Employees huddled in small circles, glancing toward the elevators each time the doors opened. Rumors traveled faster than emails. They all knew the leak was real. They all knew Naomi Carter was not just investigating discrimination anymore. She was digging deeper into numbers, bonuses, and the kind of secrets that turned corporate pride into criminal evidence. Naomi arrived at the office before sunrise. The building was quiet then, the kind of quiet that only exists when truth is about to move. She walked through the corridors slowly, passing framed awards, smiling photos of executives, and company slogans printed in silver. Integrity, innovation, inclusion. Each word now felt like a mirror reflecting the company's hypocrisy. Her assistant, a young man named Caleb, met her at the elevator. "Mrs. Carter," he said nervously, "the Federal Ethics Commission confirmed receipt of your report last night. They have requested an in-person briefing this afternoon." Naomi nodded. "Good. Has Marcus been informed?" "Yes, ma'am. He said he will meet you there at 2 o'clock. "Thank you, Caleb," she said. "And make sure every file is backed up off-site. What we are holding is not data, it is evidence." Caleb hesitated, lowering his voice. "Mrs. Carter, some people upstairs are uneasy. They are saying you are turning this company into a courtroom." Naomi met his eyes calmly. "Then maybe that is what it always should have been, a place where accountability is not optional." He swallowed, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." When he left, Naomi stood alone for a moment, staring out through the tall glass windows. The city stretched endlessly before her, a network of ambition and survival. She thought about all the people who would never walk into rooms like this, not because they lacked talent, but because doors were built to open for others. Her phone rang. It was Clarissa. "Mrs. Carter," she began, her tone clipped. "We have a situation. Someone just tried to access the restricted financial archive using a backdoor password. Security stopped it, but the attempt came from an executive-level device." Naomi's jaw tightened. "Which one?" "We cannot confirm yet, but the trace leads to a terminal registered under Richard Moore. Richard, the manager from the original incident. The one who stood silent as Melissa Crane poured that drink." Naomi's voice lowered. "Do not alert him. Not yet. Bring the security logs to my office." Within minutes, Clarissa arrived, tablet in hand. The screen displayed a record of failed logins, time-stamped at 4:23 a.m. Richard's ID number appeared clearly beside each attempt. "He tried 3 times, Clarissa said quietly, "all within the same minute." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "He is trying to cover his tracks." "What should we do?" Clarissa asked. Naomi walked toward the door. "We confront him. Today." By mid-morning, Richard was summoned to her office. He entered looking pale but composed, carrying a forced smile. "Mrs. Carter," he began, "I assume this is about the press." "I assure you, I had no involvement." Naomi cut him off. "Sit down, Richard." He obeyed, his false confidence faltering. Clarissa handed him the tablet. "These are the access attempts from your terminal early this morning. Would you like to explain?" Richard's eyes flicked to the screen, then back up. "There must be some mistake. I was not even in the building." Naomi folded her arms. "Then who used your credentials?" I do not know. Maybe a hacker?" Clarissa's tone was dry. "A hacker who happens to know your internal password pattern and security phrase?" Richard's facade began to crack. "Look, you do not understand. This whole investigation, it is ruining careers. People are scared. They are deleting things they should not have saved in the first place." Naomi stepped closer to him. "You mean the things they were hiding?" He looked up at her, desperation creeping into his voice. "You are going to destroy this company. Do you know what happens when investors pull out? People lose jobs. Families lose their livelihoods." Naomi's expression did not change. "People lost their dignity first. The jobs are not what broke this company. The silence did." Richard exhaled sharply, looking away. "You are not protecting the company, Mrs. Carter. You are burning it down." Naomi leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but sharp as glass. "Maybe that is what it takes to rebuild something honest." "Huh." He stared at her for a long moment, then slumped back in his chair. "You have no idea what kind of people you are dealing with." Naomi's tone was even colder. "Then they are about to find out what kind of woman they are dealing with." She gestured toward Clarissa. "Escort him to legal. Full suspension pending investigation. And make sure his access is revoked before he leaves the building." Richard's protest faded as security arrived. He was escorted out quietly, the way powerful men fall without noise, without mercy, only the sound of doors closing behind them. After he was gone, Clarissa looked at Naomi. He was terrified. Whoever is behind this, it is bigger than him. Naomi walked back to her desk, sitting down slowly. "Then we keep digging. The higher the truth climbs, the harder it falls. At 1:45 p.m., she and Marcus met at the Federal Ethics Office downtown. The building was stark and minimalist, all glass and steel. Inside, officials greeted them with polite reserve. One woman in a gray suit led them to a private room. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," she said, "your report is thorough. If verified, this could become one of the largest corporate discrimination cases in recent history." Naomi replied calmly, "Then let us make sure it does not get buried like the others." The official nodded. "We will begin a full-scale audit immediately. You will both be called to testify if the case proceeds." Marcus glanced at Naomi, then back at the woman. "We will be there." When they left the building, reporters were already waiting. Microphones flashed like strobe lights. "Mrs. Carter, are you taking Horizon to court? Do you regret going public?" Naomi paused on the steps, the wind catching her hair. "I do not regret telling the truth," she said clearly. "The only thing I would regret is pretending it did not matter." The crowd went silent for a moment. Cameras clicked, recording every word. Marcus placed a protective hand on her back as they walked to the car. "You just declared war," he said quietly. Naomi looked out over the street, where people stopped to watch her, some applauding softly, others simply staring. "No," she replied. "I declared honesty. The war started long before me." As their car pulled into traffic, the city skyline loomed ahead, bright, sharp, and unyielding. Somewhere behind those glass walls, more secrets were trembling, waiting for light, and Naomi Carter intended to open every single window. Night returned to the city like a tide, pulling the light away. The Carter penthouse, perched high above the skyline, glowed softly under the golden lamps that Marcus had insisted were too dim for work and too bright for rest. It had been a long day, too many interviews, too many statements, too many truths that refused to stay quiet. Naomi stood by the window, her reflection merging with the glittering skyline. In her hand was a single letter, the one that had arrived earlier that evening, delivered by courier with no sender listed. She had not opened it yet. Marcus entered the room, loosening his tie. "You have not eaten," he said gently. "That coffee from this morning does not count." She did not turn around. "I will eat after I read this." He frowned. "From who?" "I do not know," she said. "It was left with my name on it and nothing else." Marcus walked closer, concern shadowing his expression. "We have security for a reason, Naomi. You should have let me screen it." She looked at him over her shoulder. "If I start fearing every envelope, Marcus, then they have already won." With that, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was uneven, slanted, written in blue ink. She began to read aloud. "Mrs. Carter, I was one of the people who stayed silent that day in the boardroom. I was sitting in the back, near the wall. I saw what happened, and I said nothing. I laughed when others laughed. I thought silence would keep me safe. But I saw you stand there, calm, strong, unshaken, and something inside me cracked. For the first time, I felt ashamed not of what they said to you, but of what I did not say for you. I am writing this because I want to be better. I do not know how to undo what I did, but I promise it will not happen again. Sincerely, a witness." Naomi lowered the paper slowly, her eyes still on the handwriting. Marcus exhaled softly. "At least someone is waking up." Naomi nodded. "Yes, shame is the beginning of change." She folded the letter and placed it on the table. "Do you know what the hardest part of this fight is?" she asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "It is not the racism, it is not even the power. It is the fatigue of having to prove humanity over and over again." Her voice trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the exhaustion of endless resolve. Marcus stepped closer, placing his hands on her shoulders. "You do not have to carry all of it alone." Naomi gave a small, tired smile. "I do not, but I cannot set it down either." Before he could answer, her phone buzzed on the counter. The caller ID showed Clarissa. Naomi answered immediately. "Clarissa?" "Mrs. Carter," the compliance officer said, her voice tense. "We have a problem. Richard Moore disappeared from company radar 2 hours ago. His badge has been deactivated, but he entered the building using an override code." Naomi's body stiffened. "When?" "At 7:30 p.m., he used a service elevator to reach the 47th floor. Security just found his access logs." Marcus straightened. "Is he still there?" "We are checking now," Clarissa said. "The guards are searching. But there is something else. Before he entered the building, He transferred data from an external drive to a private server. It is encrypted. We think it might contain the deleted files. Naomi's tone was sharp but steady. Lock down the floor. No one leaves until we retrieve that data. Yes, Mom, Clarissa said, already typing furiously. Naomi ended the call and turned to Marcus. He is back at the building. Marcus's face hardened. We should call the police. Oh, no, Naomi said quickly. If law enforcement comes in now, the media will turn this into a spectacle. This is still about truth, not drama. Naomi, he said firmly, you are not going there alone. She met his eyes. Then we go together. 20 minutes later, their car pulled into the private lot behind the Horizon Tower. The building loomed above them, lit by sterile white lights that seemed to pierce the night. Inside, the lobby was empty, except for 2 security officers waiting by the front desk. 47th floor? Naomi asked. One of them nodded. Yes, ma'am. We locked the elevators as soon as Miss Hayes gave the order. Marcus and Naomi stepped into the private elevator, the doors closing with a soft mechanical sigh. The ascent was silent except for the low hum of the motor. Naomi's reflection looked back at her in the steel panel, steady, unflinching. When the doors opened, the floor was dark except for a faint glow spilling from the boardroom. The same room, the one where everything had begun. Marcus whispered, "Stay behind me." Naomi ignored the instruction and stepped forward first. Inside, the air was heavy with the faint smell of dust and electric heat. A laptop sat open on the table, its screen filled with lines of code. Richard Moore was there, typing frantically. He looked up as they entered, startled but defiant. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Naomi's voice was calm. "I could ask you the same thing." He stood quickly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You have no idea what you are playing with, Mrs. Carter. You think this is about justice? It is about survival. Do you know how many careers will die because of you?" Naomi walked closer. Then maybe they should. If their survival depends on oppression, they were never alive to begin with. Richard's eyes flashed. "You do not understand. I am not the only one. There are people above me, people who will not let this go." Marcus stepped forward. "Is that a threat?" Richard hesitated, then exhaled. "It is a warning. Once those files go public, you will not just be fighting racism, you will be fighting money, politics, power." Naomi met his gaze steadily. "Good. Then I am fighting in the right place." She reached for the laptop. He tried to block her, but Marcus moved faster, grabbing his wrist and forcing him back. Naomi pressed a key combination and froze the screen. "Clarissa," she said into her phone, "we have the device. Send it immediately." Within minutes, 2 security technicians arrived and secured the laptop. Richard sank into a chair, defeated. "You do not know what you started," he muttered. Naomi looked down at him. "I know exactly what I started. The difference is, I will finish it." As they escorted him out, Naomi stayed behind for a moment. The room was quiet again, too quiet. The city's lights glowed faintly through the glass, reflections of a world watching from below. Marcus turned to her. "Let us go home." She nodded, but before leaving, she looked once more at the polished table where the red stain had once been. The light caught the surface, gleaming like new. And in that reflection, Naomi whispered to herself, "It began with humiliation. It ends with truth." They stepped out into the hallway, the sound of their footsteps fading behind them. Somewhere, far below, the city kept moving, but inside that tower, justice had finally taken root. The following morning rose slow and pale, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm but before the next one. The skyline shimmered in soft silver light, still wet from the rain that had passed through the night. In the Carter household, Naomi was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee untouched before her. Her laptop screen glowed with new headlines. Horizon executive detained amid corporate scandal. Federal audit expands following Carter investigation. Naomi Carter, the woman who shook the system. The world had already moved the story into myth. She had become the symbol, the headline, the archetype of grace under fire. But to Naomi, this was not victory. It was just the middle of a war she never wanted but could not walk away from. Marcus entered the kitchen in his running clothes, towel around his neck. "You have not slept," he said gently. "I will sleep when the noise stops," she replied, eyes still on the screen. "And the noise is only getting louder." He poured himself water, leaning against the counter. "Clarissa called me early this morning. The Federal Ethics Commission wants a full deposition by the end of the week. They are asking for both of us." Naomi nodded slowly. Good. The truth should not wait for scheduling convenience. He smiled faintly. You sound like a lawyer now. Ugh. I sound like a woman tired of permission, she said quietly. He sat down across from her. You know, when we first started this company, I imagined we were building a sanctuary, somewhere where people could belong. Now it feels like we built a stage. Naomi looked up. Stages are where truth echoes. Maybe that was always the point. Her phone buzzed on the table, flashing Clarissa's name again. Naomi answered. Yes, Clarissa, Mrs. Carter, we have recovered the data from the laptop we retrieved last night. There is more than financial fraud. There are internal communications between Richard and an external consulting firm, messages coordinating contract awards in exchange for personal gain. The pattern goes back 5 years. Naomi's eyes darkened. Send me everything, and make sure copies are encrypted off-site. If what you are saying is true, this is no longer just an ethics violation, it is federal corruption. Yes, ma'am, Clarissa replied. The files are uploading now. When Naomi ended the call, Marcus could already read her expression. What now? He asked. Now, she said, we go higher. Hours later, the Horizon headquarters pulsed with activity. The news of Richard's arrest had spread through the company like wildfire. Reporters gathered outside the building's lobby, pressing microphones against the glass doors. Inside, employees walked faster, speaking softer, the atmosphere electric with unease. Naomi arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, escorted by security through a back entrance. Clarissa met her in the elevator, holding a folder so thick it strained against its clasp. These are the communications we found, Clarissa said. Emails, meeting transcripts, wire transfers. It is enough to bury half the old leadership. Naomi took the folder. Then let us not bury them. Let us expose them. No. They stepped into the top-floor conference suite where Marcus was already waiting. Around him sat 2 federal auditors, one man and one woman, both in dark suits and both watching carefully as Naomi entered. Mrs. Carter, the woman said, extending her hand. Agent Simmons, Federal Corporate Oversight Division. We appreciate your cooperation. Naomi shook her hand firmly. You will have my full cooperation, Agent Simmons, and my full memory. They began the review. For 3 hours, Naomi laid out everything, every instance of discrimination, every ignored complaint, every fraudulent bonus and shadow account. The room stayed silent except for the clicking of laptop keys as the agents recorded her statement. At one point, Marcus leaned forward. You should know, he said. My wife warned me this was happening years ago. I chose to believe the numbers instead of the people. I will not make that mistake again. Agent Simmons looked up. Then you understand that this investigation will implicate more than just a few employees. It could redefine how your entire company operates. Naomi answered before Marcus could. Then let it. If this company collapses under the weight of its own corruption, then it deserves to collapse. The agents exchanged glances, one impressed, the other cautious. When the deposition concluded, Naomi signed the last page of the statement and closed her pen with a soft click. You have everything you need, she said. Agent Simmons nodded. We do. But Mrs. Carter, when this goes public, the pressure will be immense. You will be painted as divisive, ruthless, even dangerous. Are you prepared for that? Naomi met her eyes without flinching. I have been called worse for doing far less. After the agents left, Marcus turned to her. You just gave them everything. Yes, she said, and they will take it from here. Clarissa interred quietly. Mrs. Carter, there is something else. The staff downstairs, they are gathering in the atrium. They asked if you would speak to them. Some are scared, some are angry, but they all want to hear from you. Naomi paused. How many? Nearly everyone, Clarissa said. Hundreds. Naomi looked at Marcus, who simply nodded. Go, he said. They need to see what leadership looks like in person. When Naomi stepped into the glass elevator, the city stretched below her like a sea of light. As she descended, her reflection merged with the skyline, a woman carrying both grace and fire. The elevator doors opened to the atrium, where employees had gathered in a wide circle. The air was heavy with anticipation. Conversations hushed as she walked to the center, the echo of her heels against the marble floor, the only sound. She looked around slowly before speaking. You have all seen the news, she began. You have read the rumors. Let me tell you the truth. Oh. Her voice carried clearly through the space. This company is not dying. It is waking up, and waking up is painful, but pain is proof that something alive is trying to heal. No one moved. No one spoke. I know many of you are afraid, she continued. Afraid of what comes next. Afraid of who gets blamed. Afraid of change. But fear cannot build anything. Only honesty can. She paused, scanning the faces before her. I am not here to destroy Horizon dynamics. I am here to make sure that when people walk through these doors, they know they are stepping into a place that values their dignity more than its image. The crowd stayed silent for another beat, then, one by one, hands began to rise. The first clap echoed through the atrium, then another, and another, until the sound became a wave of applause. Naomi's expression softened, not with pride, but with relief. She did not smile widely, only nodded once, as if to say, we are not finished yet. From the balcony above, Marcus watched her, the woman who had transformed his empire from a monument of glass into a living, breathing testament of conscience. And as the applause thundered beneath her, Naomi Carter knew that this was more than vindication. This was resurrection. The applause rolled through the atrium like a wave that refused to end. Naomi stood still at the center, her hands folded calmly in front of her, letting the sound settle into her chest. It was not applause for her, it was applause for the truth. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the sound did not belong to performance, but to awakening. When the crowd quieted, Naomi looked out at them. We have work to do, she said softly, but the microphone carried her voice through every corner of the room. This applause, it is not an ending. It is a beginning. What comes next will test all of us. But if you stand for what is right, I promise you will not stand alone. Then she stepped back. The crowd began to disperse slowly, conversations rising again. Some smiled at her as they passed. Others simply nodded, their expressions marked by respect rather than pity. Marcus met her near the elevator, pride clear in his eyes. You just turned a company meeting into a movement. Naomi smiled faintly. It was never just a company. It was a mirror. We finally stopped looking away. Clarissa joined them moments later, her tablet clutched tight to her chest. Mrs. Carter, she said, her voice low but urgent. You should see this. She turned the screen toward Naomi. A live news broadcast was playing footage of a protest forming outside the Horizon headquarters. A group of former employees, led by Melissa Crane, was holding signs that read, Corporate Revenge, Not Reform, and Carter Empire Built on Fear. Reporters were already surrounding them, cameras flashing. Marcus's expression darkened. She is back? Naomi's eyes stayed steady on the screen. Of course she is. Guilt rarely dies quietly. Clarissa frowned. The news networks are framing it as a counterstory. They are saying the reform campaign is a personal vendetta against senior staff. Naomi's voice remained calm. Let them say it. Every truth sounds like revenge to the people who built the lie. Marcus looked at her. You know she will go to the press with everything she can twist. Naomi nodded. Then I will give the press something real to print. Oh. She walked toward the main entrance, ignoring the guards' hesitant protests. As she stepped outside, the midday sun hit her face like a spotlight. Across the street, cameras turned immediately. The crowd of protesters faltered for a moment, seeing her appear without security, without fear. Melissa froze, her megaphone halfway to her mouth. Naomi crossed the street slowly, the murmur of reporters rising around her. When she reached the edge of the crowd, she spoke not through a microphone, but in a voice that carried anyway. Melissa, she said evenly, you said I destroyed your career, but you destroyed your own when you forgot how to treat people. Melissa's face flushed red. You humiliated me. You turned the whole world against me. Naomi shook her head. The world turned because it finally saw what you did in the dark. I did not create your downfall, Melissa. I just refused to hide it. The crowd began to quiet. Reporters leaned closer. Microphones extended. Melissa's voice trembled with anger. You think you are some kind of saint? You think one viral video makes you the moral compass of corporate America? Naomi took a single step closer. No, it makes me responsible. Because when power gives you a platform, silence becomes complicity. The protesters behind Melissa shifted uneasily. Some lowered their signs. Others looked away. Naomi continued, her voice calm but sharp. You are not my enemy, Melissa. You are a symptom of the disease we are finally naming. What you did in that room was wrong. Yes, but what the rest of them did, by watching and doing nothing, that was worse. Melissa's shoulders slumped. Her eyes glistened, though she tried to hide it. Naomi glanced toward the cameras. I am not here to destroy anyone. I am here to make sure no one else has to go through what happened that day. Every voice that was silenced deserves its echo, and every person who stayed silent has a chance to speak now. Then she turned to the reporters. Print that. There was a hush, a kind of stunned, quiet, only truth can create. Melissa said nothing. Her sign slipped from her fingers and fell to the pavement. Naomi walked back across the street, the crowd parting silently to make room for her. Inside the building, Marcus met her at the door. That will be everywhere by morning, he said softly. I hope so, Naomi replied. The world needs to see that redemption is louder than revenge. By late afternoon, every major network aired the footage. Clips of Naomi facing Melissa became the most replayed segment of the day. Anchors called it the confrontation that redefined power. Hashtags multiplied by the hour. In one segment, a young reporter summarized it perfectly. Naomi Carter did not just win an argument. She changed the tone of the conversation. For the first time, the story was not about the scandal, it was about the standard. At home that night, Naomi sat in the living room with Marcus, the glow of the television playing across their faces. The footage showed her calm stance, her measured words, and the moment Melissa's sign hit the ground. Marcus reached for the remote and turned the volume down. You handled that with grace. Again, Naomi sighed. Grace is not for show. It is armor. He smiled. And it suits you. Ed. Her phone buzzed once more, another unknown number. She hesitated, then opened the message. It was from an employee she did not know personally. I was in that crowd today. I used to think staying quiet made me neutral. You showed me it made me part of the problem. I will not be quiet anymore. Naomi put the phone down slowly. Every time someone says that, she whispered, we win a little more. Marcus watched her, thoughtful. You know this will not stop, right? There will always be another Melissa, another Richard, another storm. Naomi nodded. Yes, but storms are how the air clears. Outside the window, the city glimmered, endless and alive. Somewhere below, the last of the protesters were leaving, their voices fading into the hum of traffic. Naomi stood by the glass, watching the night reclaim the streets. This was never about me, she said quietly. It was about showing them what justice looks like when it walks instead of shouts. Marcus came up behind her, his reflection joining hers in the glass. And what does it look like now? Naomi's eyes softened as she looked out over the city. It looks like tomorrow. And in that moment, as the lights of the city blinked like stars, Naomi Carter finally allowed herself to breathe, not in triumph, but in peace. The fight was not over, but for the first time, the world was no longer deaf. It was listening. The next morning, the city awakened beneath a different kind of light. It was not just sunlight, it was scrutiny. Horizon dynamics had become the heartbeat of a national conversation. Talk shows debated Naomi's confrontation with Melissa. Universities were quoting her speeches in ethics lectures. Civil rights organizations called her the quiet storm that corporate America did not see coming. Inside the Carter penthouse, Naomi was once again up before dawn. The television hummed softly in the background, tuned to a morning news program. A commentator spoke over looping footage of her calm, composed face. In an era of outrage and viral drama, Naomi Carter has done something few can. She led with silence and made the world listen. Marcus entered, fastening his cufflinks. They are calling you the most influential woman in business this year, he said with a faint smile. Naomi stirred her tea, her tone measured. They said the same thing about Rosa Parks once, but she did not sit for headlines. She sat for justice. Marcus looked at her thoughtfully. And you stood for it? She met his gaze. We both did. But Marcus, this is not the end. There is still more underneath. Richard's files pointed to someone higher, someone who funded the cover-ups. He hesitated. Naomi, the federal auditors are already in control. If there is a deeper connection, let them find it. She shook her head. They will not. They will look where the paperwork leads, not where the power hides. He frowned. You think there is another layer? Naomi's eyes were sharp and certain. I know there is, and I am going to find it. Before Marcus could respond, Clarissa's voice came through on speaker. Mrs. Carter, there is something you need to see. The auditors recovered partial communications between Richard and a consultant named Vance Drummond. He used to work with the board's external advisory firm. Naomi froze. Drummond? The same firm that oversees Horizon's diversity reports? Yes, ma'am, Clarissa said. The same one. The emails show that Drummond was paid to manage optics around workplace complaints, essentially to bury them. Marcus exhaled sharply. That is manipulation at the federal level. Naomi's voice hardened. It is deception with a business card. Send me every file you have, Clarissa. I want to meet him. Clarissa hesitated. Ma'am, he does not work for Horizon directly anymore. He consults privately. His office is in the Madison Financial Center. Naomi stood, grabbing her blazer. Then that is where I will be. Marcus moved toward her quickly. Naomi, do not go alone. She turned, her tone soft but firm. I do not need protection, Marcus. I need proof. 2 hours later, Naomi stepped out of a black sedan in front of the Madison Financial Center, a tall, cold building that seemed to swallow the morning light. She entered the lobby, her heels echoing sharply across the marble floor. The receptionist recognized her instantly, eyes widening slightly. I am here to see Mr. Drummond, Naomi said calmly. The receptionist stammered, Do you have an appointment? Naomi smiled faintly. No, but he will want to make one after today. Minutes later, she was escorted to the top floor. Vance Drummond's office was lined with steel and glass, his desk spotless except for a single crystal paperweight. He stood as she entered mid-50s, pale, neatly groomed, his eyes sharp and calculating. Mrs. Carter, he said smoothly, to what do I owe this surprise? Naomi remained standing. You already know why I am here. You were paid to manipulate data to erase discrimination complaints and make this company look clean. Drummond's smile did not fade. Those are heavy accusations. You have documentation? She held up the folder Clarissa had sent. I do not need accusations when I have receipts. Oh, he chuckled softly. The files Richard tried to hide. Clever man, but sloppy. You see, Mrs. Carter, in corporate America, truth is not erased. It is edited. Naomi's eyes narrowed. You edited people's pain into paperwork. Pain, he said with a shrug, does not look good in quarterly reports. Naomi took a slow step forward. You think this is about numbers? It is not. It is about every person who was denied a chance to rise because you thought their story was inconvenient. Drummond's tone turned cold. You are in dangerous territory, Mrs. Carter. The people I work for do not appreciate disruptions. Naomi leaned closer. The people I fight for do not fear them. He stared at her, measuring her resolve. Then he smiled again, that same hollow smile that power wears when it believes itself untouchable. You will not win this, he said quietly. The system always absorbs the noise. Naomi's voice cut through the room like glass. Then I will be the echo it cannot silence. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. You should know, Mr. Drummond, the federal auditors already have copies of your communications. I made sure they were delivered this morning. For the first time, his confident expression faltered. Goodbye, Mr. Drummond, she said softly. Next time we speak, it will not be in your office. Back in her car, Naomi stared out the window as the building receded behind her. The city moved like a living organism, unaware of how close corruption sat beneath its polished surface. She knew this fight would not end with one man, or even one company. But she also knew something had shifted. The silence was no longer on their side. Her phone buzzed. It was Clarissa again. Mrs. Carter, the board wants an emergency session tonight. They say the federal agents are requesting Horizon's cooperation in widening the investigation to other firms connected to the same consultancy. Naomi smiled faintly. Of course they are. The truth is contagious. When she returned to Horizon that evening, the entire building felt different. People were talking openly in the halls about ethics, about accountability, about culture. It was as if sunlight had finally reached places that had been in shadow for years. Marcus met her at the elevator, relief written across his face. You found him? Yes, Naomi said. And I found the root. He touched her arm gently. You have done enough, Naomi. You do not have to fight every battle. She turned to him, eyes steady and kind. I am not fighting, Marcus. I am clearing the ground so something better can grow. He smiled, quietly proud. You are extraordinary. Naomi looked out through the glass at the city beyond. No, she said softly. I am ordinary. That is the point. They built a system assuming women like me would stay quiet. I am just proving them wrong. And as the lights of Horizon Dynamics flickered on across the skyline, Naomi Carter knew that the world was no longer watching her story, it was learning from it. And that, she realized, was how revolutions began. The city was restless that night. Television anchors spoke her name like it was both a warning and a promise. Every business channel, every talk show, every trending topic revolved around Horizon Dynamics and the woman who refused to bow. In the penthouse, Naomi stood at her desk reviewing new reports from Clarissa. The files on her laptop glowed faintly, line after line of names, numbers, and transfers, proof that the corruption spread far beyond one company. Marcus sat across from her, his tie loosened, exhaustion showing beneath his steady composure. "You realize what this means," he said quietly. "You are not just taking on Horizon anymore. You are taking on an entire network of companies." Naomi did not look up. "Then let the network tremble." He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "They will come after us. They will dig for anything they can use. Old deals, old contracts, anything that can make you look compromised." Naomi finally met his eyes. "Then let them dig. They will find roots, not rot." A soft chime interrupted them. The television in the background switched to a breaking news alert. The anchor's voice was sharp with urgency. "We have just received confirmation that the Department of Federal Ethics will open a multi-company audit tied to the Horizon corruption case. Anonymous sources close to the investigation say that the evidence originated from within Horizon's leadership, specifically Mrs. Naomi Carter." Marcus turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Anonymous? You think that leak came from Drummond?" Naomi shook her head. "No. That leak came from Clarissa. I told her to release it if the board tried to suppress the findings." He blinked. "You planned this?" "I promised transparency," she said simply. "This is what it looks like." Marcus leaned back, half in disbelief, half in admiration. "You really are unstoppable." Naomi smiled faintly. "No, I am just done waiting for permission." Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "Watch your back. Not everyone wants truth to live." Marcus saw the screen and tensed. "That is not idle talk, Naomi. You are threatening the livelihoods of people who built their empires on silence." She closed the message calmly. "Then let them learn to live without silence." At that moment, Clarissa called. "Mrs. Carter, I need to warn you. I just received an alert our servers are under attack. Someone is trying to breach the protected files we sent to the auditors." Naomi's tone sharpened. "Can you trace the source?" "It is routed through multiple proxies, but it looks like an internal signature, possibly from a board-level terminal." "Lock everything down," Naomi ordered. "Back up to offline storage and cut access for everyone except the auditors." "Yes, ma'am. Already on it." When the call ended, Marcus stood. "You should go public now, Naomi, before they twist this. Make a statement tonight." Naomi nodded slowly. "You are right. If the truth is under attack, it should not hide. It should speak." She walked to the balcony, the city lights stretching beneath her like an ocean of restless stars. The skyline shimmered, filled with buildings built on ambition and, in many cases, denial. She took a deep breath, then turned back to Marcus. "Set up a live broadcast," she said. "No script, no teleprompter, just me and the truth." Within hours, the Horizon media team gathered in the company's press auditorium. Reporters filled every seat, their cameras trained on the small podium under the bright white light. The live feed had already been announced, Naomi Carter to address the nation. Millions were waiting. Marcus stood backstage beside her. "Once you walk out there, there is no going back," he said softly. Naomi adjusted the microphone pinned to her collar. "There was no going back the moment they poured that drink on me." He looked at her for a long moment. "Then finish it, Naomi." When she stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. The world seemed to hold its breath. The cameras zoomed in as she took her place behind the podium, the light haloing her face. "Good evening," she began. "You have seen the headlines, you have heard the rumors. Tonight, I will give you the truth." Her voice carried with quiet force, clear and unwavering. "Yes, Horizon Dynamics has been under investigation for discrimination, for fraud, and now for collusion. And yes, I am the one who exposed it. I did not do it to destroy this company. I did it to rebuild it on honesty, not illusion." The reporters leaned forward, scribbling notes. "I have been told to stay quiet, to protect reputations, to avoid scandal. But I have learned that silence is the most dangerous currency of all. It buys comfort for the guilty and costs everything for the innocent." The room stayed silent, every camera fixed on her. I know that telling the truth will cost me friends, status, maybe even safety. But if telling the truth shakes the walls of an empire, then maybe the empire deserved to fall. The sound of shutters clicking filled the air. Naomi continued, her tone rising just slightly, not loud, but resolute. This is not about one company. This is about every place that hires diversity for optics but silences it in practice. Every meeting where prejudice wears a suit and calls itself professionalism. Every leader who claims to stand for equality until it threatens their power. Those days are over. A murmur rippled through the crowd, soft, stunned, electric. I am not asking for applause, Naomi said finally. I am asking for accountability. I am asking for courage from every person watching this, in every office, in every boardroom. Speak when it is hard, act when it is risky, because dignity is not a department policy, it is a human one. She paused, letting the words settle like the calm after thunder. Then she added, quietly but firmly, and to those who think they can silence the truth, remember this: lies may run fast, but truth does not stop running. She stepped back from the podium. The audience erupted not in chaos, but in a deep, resonant applause that seemed to fill the space from floor to ceiling. Marcus watched her from backstage, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. When the broadcast ended, Naomi walked off stage and into the wings. She looked exhausted but steady, her breathing slow and deliberate. Marcus met her halfway. That was not a speech, he said softly. That was history. Naomi looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Marcus, history is what comes next. Outside, across the city, phones buzzed, screens lit up, and hearts stirred. For some, her words were a challenge. For others, a mirror. And for many who had been silent too long, it was a spark. That night, the world did not just hear Naomi Carter, they believed her. And belief, she knew, was the beginning of change. The next day, the city did not just wake up, it roared. Every television screen, every news feed, every podcast replayed Naomi Carter's live address. Headlines called it the speech that broke the boardroom. Others called it the moment corporate America blinked. Inside Horizon Dynamics, the atmosphere felt charged, as if electricity ran through the walls. Employees moved differently, more deliberate, more aware. Conversations that once happened in whispers now took place openly. For the first time, the building felt alive with honesty instead of fear. Naomi stood in her new office, sunlight spilling through the tall glass windows. The morning air was crisp, but her thoughts were already racing. The federal auditors had confirmed receipt of Horizon's full cooperation. Her inbox overflowed with messages from activists, journalists, even CEOs of rival companies who claimed to be inspired by her words. She smiled at the irony. Inspiration was easy when the spotlight was warm. The test would come when it burned. Clarissa entered the office with a folder in hand. Mrs. Carter, the board called for an emergency assembly. They want to discuss the next steps in the investigation and the possibility of restructuring leadership. Naomi closed her laptop. Restructuring? Clarissa nodded. They are considering removing several department heads and consolidating operations under one central division. Some of the executives think you should lead it. Naomi tilted her head slightly. A promotion or a test? Maybe both, Clarissa said with a small smile. Naomi stood. Then let us find out. Oh. By 10 o'clock, the boardroom was full. Cameras were off this time. The atmosphere was formal, heavy with the residue of exposure. Henry Langford, the board chair, sat at the head of the table, his face unreadable. He gestured for Naomi to sit beside him. Mrs. Carter, he began, I think it is safe to say that you have reshaped this company's identity in ways none of us could have predicted. But now, we must look forward. The public believes in you, and so do many of our employees. We would like to make that belief official. Naomi's gaze stayed steady. What are you proposing, Henry? He folded his hands. Effective immediately, the board has voted to dissolve the traditional hierarchy of Horizon Dynamics. We are establishing a new executive division, one focused entirely on ethics, equality, and internal reform. We want you to lead it as co-chief executive officer. The room stirred. Several executives shifted in their seats. Marcus, sitting opposite her, smiled faintly but said nothing. Naomi's expression did not change. Chief executive officer? She repeated. Henry nodded. You and Marcus would share leadership. 2 voices, 1 vision, the symbol of restoration. Naomi leaned back slightly. Restoration sounds noble, Henry, but let us be honest, it sounds like damage control. The room went still. I will not lead to repair a public image, she continued. I will lead to rebuild a moral foundation. If that is not what this board wants, then find someone else to polish your reputation. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Henry exhaled slowly, a faint smile forming. That, Mrs. Carter, is exactly why we want you. Naomi looked across the table at Marcus. His eyes met hers with quiet pride. She could see what he was thinking, how far they had come from that humiliating morning when a smoothie had become a symbol of everything wrong in their world. Then I accept, she said finally. But under one condition. Every executive who ignored or dismissed discrimination complaints will resign before the week ends. No negotiations. Henry nodded. Agreed. Naomi stood, her voice clear and unflinching. Then we begin today. Horizon Dynamics will no longer be a monument to wealth, it will be a model for justice. The meeting adjourned to quiet applause. Outside the glass walls, employees gathered in the hallway, watching through the transparent panels. When Naomi stepped out, the crowd erupted, not the chaotic kind of cheering that follows scandal, but the deep, grounded applause that comes from respect. Clarissa caught up with her as she walked toward the elevator. How does it feel to be co-chief executive officer? Naomi smiled. It feels like a responsibility disguised as a title. By early afternoon, the announcement went public. The headline flashed across every news ticker in the country. Naomi Carter, named Chief Executive Officer of Horizon Dynamics' historic step toward corporate accountability. Social media lit up. Some hailed it as a victory. Others accused her of using the movement for power. Naomi read none of it. She had learned long ago that the truth did not need to argue, it only needed to endure. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Naomi walked through the building alone. She passed the empty conference rooms, the same corridors where people once avoided her gaze. Every sound, the hum of the lights, the distant murmur of conversation felt like proof of survival. She entered the 47th floor boardroom, the same one. The air inside felt lighter now, as though the ghosts had been exorcised by truth. The table gleamed beneath the soft lights. On its surface sat a single framed photograph. Marcus and Naomi at a company gala years earlier, back when everything looked perfect but nothing truly was. She picked it up, studying the two faces frozen in time, smiling, unaware. Then she set it back down. The door opened behind her. Marcus walked in quietly, 2 glasses of wine in hand. You should be celebrating, he said. Naomi smiled faintly. I am, just differently. He handed her a glass. To new beginnings, he said. She lifted her glass. To earn beginnings. They clinked glasses softly. For a moment, silence filled the room. But it was a peaceful kind of silence, the kind that did not hide anything. Marcus looked around. It is strange, he said softly. This room used to feel powerful. Now it just feels honest. Naomi nodded. That is what power should feel like. He smiled. You know, I keep thinking about that day. The look on their faces when you stood up, calm and unshaken. It was the first time I realized how small arrogance looks next to dignity. Naomi's gaze met his. That was the day the masks fell, for them and for us. They stood there together, watching the city lights flicker through the glass. After a while, Marcus said, What will you do tomorrow? Naomi finished her wine and set the glass down. Tomorrow, I will walk through every department and listen. No speeches, no press, no performance, just listening. Because justice is not loud, it is consistent. Marcus nodded. And after that? Naomi looked out the window at the city stretching endlessly below. After that, she said softly, I will build something they cannot bury again. Outside, the skyline shimmered. Inside, Naomi Carter stood quietly at the edge of her victory, not triumphant, but steady, because she knew what no headline could capture. This was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a standard. And as the night deepened over the city, the light inside Horizon Dynamics stayed on bright, unwavering, a promise fulfilled. Morning sunlight poured through the glass towers of Horizon Dynamics, reflecting across polished floors that seemed cleaner, brighter reborn. The company moved with a strange new rhythm, one born not of fear but of awareness. Naomi Carter stepped from the elevator, her heels clicking steadily across the marble. Employees paused, greeting her with genuine respect rather than obligation. The large mural in the lobby caught her eye. Integrity first, always. She smiled faintly. Good, she whispered. Now it begins. Marcus joined her moments later, coffee in hand. First full day as co-chief executive officer, he said. How does it feel? Naomi glanced around the lobby where conversations hummed like quiet restoration. It feels earned. He nodded. And what's next? Naomi's eyes met his. We rebuild not with words, but with culture. I want every person here to remember this company by how it made them feel, not just what it paid them. As she walked toward the boardroom, the sunlight followed her, steady, deliberate, unafraid. It was a new day, and this time, Horizon's walls were holding truth, not hiding it. By midday, the transformation had begun to take shape. The old hierarchy was gone, titles erased from office doors, walls stripped of outdated portraits that once celebrated privilege instead of progress. In their place, Naomi introduced open panels of glass etched with 5 words: respect, accountability, equity, courage, truth. She moved through each floor quietly, observing teams at work, stopping to listen rather than instruct. When a young analyst nervously asked, "Mrs. Carter, do you really think a company can change people?" Naomi paused before answering. "I do not think companies change people," she said gently. "People change companies when they are finally seen." In the cafeteria, workers of every rank sat together for the first time, laughter mingling with conversation instead of tension. It was small, almost fragile, but it was real. Naomi watched, her heart steady, knowing that culture always started in moments like this, not with applause, but with choice. As she stepped outside onto the rooftop terrace, the city stretched before her, bright and endless. Marcus joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Naomi smiled. "What?" He gestured toward the hum of life below. "That sound. It is not fear anymore." Naomi looked out at the horizon. "No," she said softly. "It is faith." And for the first time, the building named Horizon truly lived up to its name because from here, everything looked like possibility. That evening, Horizon Dynamics held its first company-wide forum, a gathering not for announcements, but for voices. Hundreds filled the atrium, from interns to executives, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity, hope, and cautious belief. Naomi stood at the center without a microphone, her voice clear and calm. "Tonight is not about policy. It is about people. You all watched a company confront its truth. Now, we decide what to build from it." She gestured toward the audience. "If you have something to say, stand and say it. No hierarchy, no fear." At first, silence. Then a woman from Human Resources rose, her voice trembling but strong. "For years I was told to keep it professional, which really meant stay quiet. Thank you for proving that professionalism and justice can coexist." Applause filled the room, not polite but genuine. One by one, others stood. A janitor, a software engineer, a senior manager. Each spoke not to impress, but to heal. Marcus watched from the edge of the crowd, his eyes never leaving Naomi. When the final speaker sat down, Naomi said softly, "This is what leadership should sound like." The crowd stood, clapping not for her, but for themselves, for the courage it took to be honest. Naomi looked around and thought, this is what redemption feels like, not loud, but real. And as the applause rose, the sound was no longer for one woman or one story, it was for everyone who had ever been told their voice did not matter. Tonight, it finally did. Days later, the sun rose over Horizon Dynamics, with a warmth that felt almost symbolic. The glass towers shimmered not as monuments to profit, but as beacons of possibility. Inside, laughter echoed through the hallways, small reminders that dignity had returned to the workplace. Naomi Carter stood once more on the rooftop terrace, the same spot where months ago she had promised Marcus that truth would outlive scandal. The wind brushed against her face as she looked out at the city, a skyline she had once feared, now a horizon she had reclaimed. Marcus stepped beside her, quiet and proud. "You did it," he said softly. Naomi shook her head. "We did not win, Marcus. We grew. There is a difference." He smiled. "And what now?" Naomi turned toward him, her eyes steady and bright. "Now we teach. We lead by how we treat people, not how we manage them. We build a world where respect is not earned through title, but through truth." Below them, The horizon flag unfurled in the morning breeze white, with bold letters that simply read, "Dignity works here." Naomi took a deep breath. "This is not the end of a story," she said quietly. "It is the beginning of a standard." Marcus slipped his arm around her shoulders. Together, they watched the city awaken. And as sunlight spread across the glass, Horizon Dynamics stood as more than a company. It was a reminder to everyone, everywhere, that justice does not always roar. Sometimes, it simply stands tall, calm, and unshakable. Naomi smiled, whispering to herself, "Let them see what Grace built."